Hi, good evening. Glad you're here. Welcome. My name is Jochen Virich, Curatorial Director at the Brinton Museum, and it is my great pleasure here to, introduce our oral history roundtable. As you all know, this panel was organized in conjunction with the exhibition, The Unfinished War, The Battle of the Little Bighorn in Native American Art, which is downstairs in the S.K. Johnston Gallery on the second floor. In case you haven't seen it, make sure you see it. And after this panel, we'll have the gallery on the second floor open for another 30 minutes or so you will have time to go downstairs. And for space reasons, we moved this event up here because the gallery on the second floor is just too narrow to have a larger event like this. So we will have a few slides that we're projecting as we go along. This exhibition, and here's just a few samples from the show that you see downstairs, includes Native American perspectives of the battle expressed through the visual arts. It ranges chronologically from historic pictographic paintings made by survivors of the battle to modern and contemporary artists. And again, just a few examples here to kind of, inspire you. In this exhibition, you will find works across multiple generations. Today, we actually have one of the artists is here among us. And even by native people who were traditionally enemies. So perhaps one of the main learning outcomes for me as the show's curator is that there are multiple Native perspectives on the battle. So in the spirit of multiple voices, we have invited 8 speakers who share their memories of the battle through oral history and singing. It is my great honor to welcome them and to introduce the moderator of the evening, Mr. Wallace Bearcham. Mr. Bearcham is chairman of the American Indian Advisory Council. Several participants today are members of the Advisory Council, and he's a member of the Brinton Museum Board of Trustees. He lives in Lame Deer and is on the Northern Cheyenne Culture Commission. And I'm going to turn it over to Wallace.
Good evening. We'll get the show going here. I want to introduce Donovan Taylor Beartusk. He's from the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. Cheyenne name is Mahako, which translates to badger. And he is a member of the Dog Soldier Warrior Society. He's the drum keeper, so he's real knowledgeable about the songs. He also authored a book on the Little Bighorn. So we'll get the show started here. I'm going to introduce Donovan Taylor. He's going to open up our event here with a prayer, with a song, and then, of course, a little bit of the oral history. So at this time, Mr. Donovan Taylor.
Mahakut natsisive. Donovan Taylor nahashive. Nadis a mil han nadis a nimin. Nadis est. I start out with a prayer. Mahid ziko and the han dos ziko. Zimuhus dis til hukum havihud. And da hoa to biwat ziko. Ostania must it save est had the good didza. Whenever biwat das is ziko. This time zima zihish hus was stania til ziko to save haywise was stania. Want das haywise biwat my namat haywise yam hanin. Let in his han and towards me. Da hoa to biwat ziko my nan. Nish. Now I'm going to sing a memorial song for all the ancestors that passed on and all the people in general that in our lives that had gone on in this journey. So I'm going to sing a memorial song. Ya 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 ya, we ya hey, we ha ya hey yo. We ha ya hey yo, we yo hey, we ha ya hey yo, we ha ya yo hey, we ha ya hey yo, way yo ho, way yo, way yo. And this next one is that song there was some of the warriors that fought for us, made their journey. And I just thought I'd sing one verse of that one. And this other one is also for our ancestors too. It's a wolf song. It's hardly ever sang. It's also an honor song as well. We commemorate our warriors with the wolves. Yeah, hey, yo, hey, yo, yeah, hey, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo. Way ha, way ya, hey, way ha, ya, hey, yo, way ha, ya, hey, ya, hey, yo, ya, way ya, hey, yo, ya, hey, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo. Way ya, ha, way ya, ya, hey, yo, way ya, hey, ya, ha, yo, ya, hey, ya, hey, ya, hey, yo, hey, yo. Way yo hey yo ya way ya hey yo ya hey yo hey yo hey yo hey yo way ya ha way ya hey yo way ya hey ya hey yo ya hey ya hey ya hey yo hey yo way yo hey yo way ya ha way ya ya hey yo way ya hey ya hey yo ya hey ya hey ya hey yo hey yo way yo hey yo nahan namanda de says to hat Little Bighorn in our language is shkik saso eyo he. That's the Little Bighorn River, translated as a small sheep. And then that river next, west of it is Macheksaso eyo he. Mach is like large or many. Ksaso, that horned beast, real big horned beast, river. Eyo he means river. That's on that side by Hardin, Bighorn County area. Now, it's one of our protocols that we requested from our elders that were alive during this time within the past decade that they happened to leave us is a protocol. You give them food, maybe tobacco, that means tobacco in our language, or sometimes makgad. If we don't hardly see them, if they're in a rush, we don't got food, we didn't prepare anything, makgad, give them mitzinos. And you ask them or sometimes just a cigarette, that's what you call protocol, out of respect for the information that you're gathering. This is what I had to do, not only for this book, but just in my own journey in this life. Sometimes it's medicine, sometimes it's our ceremonies. Mainly the male elders that we call, you would say old men, but in Mahakse and Cheyenne language, that means the knowledgeable ones. They don't really distinguish of age or things to that nature. But in this research that I've done, it was quite extensive. It's kind of hard because our elders have been leaving this during this pursuit of gathering information for this book that we made. It's even down in the visitor center. It's called The History They Tell, First Nations and Native Americans regarding the Battle of the Little Bighorn. And I'm a co-author on this. And in the back of that book, I got my regalia, my headdress of our ancestors. It's really elaborate, it's really kind of extraordinary, but back in ancient times, it wasn't really that, extraordinary. All the colors and all the beautiful ribbons and etc. It was sometimes mainly just leather. And some of the headdress in that wasn't really elaborate like we have. You would say it's Hollywood now, but yet we commemorate our ancestors with this headdress in our society as well. And there were many societies, and I can tell you now, I know how to say them in Cheyenne too. The Elkhorns is Hemoyuchis. and the dogman is Hodamidanio, and our chiefs is Viho, and the Kip Fox is Monson Hidanio. That's the Kip Fox Warrior Society. And I even know them songs, but I don't know if I got them that much time to sing all these songs for you guys, you know. I try to keep according to the ones that are going to speak here too. So, but yeah, as a drum keeper, I was able to gather the songs for each appropriate warrior society and chieftains of my people, and I'm very honored. And I also gather some ceremonial songs too as well, and they're not suited for public performance. Some of them are specifically for that ceremony, and I can't do that. But today I shared some of the memorial songs in our wolf song for you all, and I just want to say thank you. Hukahe.
Yeah, thank you for that round of applause there. Okay, yeah, thank you for that round of applause. Really honored to have served and worked with our next panelist here, Mardell. And she comes to us from the Crow Nation. She's a longtime member of the American Indian Advisory Council here at the Brinton, and worked for the National Park Service as a ranger at the Little Bighorn battlefield for a long time. So I'll turn the mic over to her at this time. So thank you, Mardell.
This is the first time I've ever been up first speaker. Usually they put me in the last so that everybody will be gone by the time they get to me. Well, yes, I was at the battlefield for quite a while. And in the process of working there, we had thousands of visitors, of course, who wanted to know everything about the battle and the people who were involved. And you had to know about each one of them. And, but you know, when they showed me some of the Muslim paintings of White Swan, it occurred to me that there were not that many questions about the paintings. Hardly anybody knew about them. Until one day, I got a telephone call from a lady, I don't remember where she was from, but she wanted to know about the Muslim paintings. So I looked up what information I could, and that was about all I had to do was White Swan at that time. And you know, we were so busy with everything else that I didn't go back to researching White Swan. Well, I was there at the battlefield for quite a while, like I said, and one day they said that I had some money left over at the end of the fiscal year. I had about $2,000 left over, and they said that I had to spend it on something. So I went down to the library. Our library at the time was in the basement of the current visitor center, and it was gray in there, a gray desk, gray shelves, gray filing, gray rug even. It was pretty drab. So I said, let's remodel this library. I said, I've got $2,000. And at that time, $2,000 was a lot of money. That was about 1985. So I had the librarian order what he wanted, of course with my approval. It was pretty colorful. It was really nice. He made it into a real attractive place to work. His name was Evan Williams. And after everything was put in place, he said he wanted to name the library the White Swan Memorial Library. I said, oh, okay, we'll consider it. And he said, Mardell, he was the only one of the 6 Crow Scouts that, is it up there? Okay. That painted his memories of the battle. A lot of people would ask about the Native American participants in the battle, but very rarely did they talk about him. So Evan said his visual art is the only written or painted account of the battle, so it should be named after him. All the other 5 other scouts had been interviewed by hundreds of writers and journalists and newspaper reporters, at the time, but none of them had written a book or anything. So, but he did. He painted his memory of the battle on muslin and on ledger paper. And so it went through the process, and it was agreed that we would name it the White Swan Memorial Library. I left in 1990. I went to work with the 5 civilized tribes in Oklahoma, and when I came back, the library had been moved to the stone house, which was the living quarters of some former employee at the northwestern end of the cemetery. The library is still there and the name remains. And so White Swan, who was not as famous as the others, if you think about it. White Man Runcium, whose great-grandson is sitting next to me, was very famous. He was well known. He was photographed many, many times. And so was Curly. He was also photographed many times. And of course, their accounts of the battle, which were in many other books, were misinterpreted by a lot of people. And there was a lot of controversy over that. But White Swan's painting remains unchanged, unchallenged, and I think that he wrote the truth on there. What he saw, what he remembered, and I began to admire him very much, and I'm glad that the name remained. He was the only warrior or the only scout that was wounded in the Battle of the Little Bighorn. His hand was nearly shot off, and he was hit in the head. He was very severely wounded. They took him after the battle was over. The Sioux and Cheyenne had left, and the far west, a steamer that accompanied the military had come as far as the mouth of the Little Bighorn and the Bighorn River near Hardin, Montana. And they took him aboard, and they nursed him, and eventually he did make it home. But he never had the use of his hand, and so he painted with only one hand. So he was an amazing man. He didn't speak much, they say. And when I looked over what I researched of him, which, like I said, wasn't much, I felt like he was a very sad man. And I felt like, okay, where are his relatives? I knew the relatives of White Man Runcium, Curly, and all the rest of the others, but I heard very little of White Swan. I did have a grant from the National Park Service to go and interview some of the relatives of the Crow Scouts, and one of them was the widow of the grandson of White Man Runcium. Curly. And she knew quite a bit. And then during the interview, which was supposed to be about Curly, she said that White Swan was a brother to Curly, because he often called him Biga, which means elder brother. I said, okay, they're related? And he said, I don't know if it was by clan or by blood, because the Crow tribe, is very strong in their clan ways. When you're born, you go to your mother's clan. We're matrilineal. It's very strong still. But anyway, I tried to find out after that, but no luck. I could not find that he had any relatives around, and of course I didn't stay at it because I had other work to do. And lo and behold, I retired from the Park Service in 2002, came back home, And a little bit later on, I was working at the Western Heritage Center with this man right here. We had a lot of fun. But a guy at the other end of the telephone wanted to meet me. He wanted to go have dinner with us. And us was me and Adrian Heidenreich, who is a very well-known historian in Billings and around the area. He was an expert on the ledger art, so he invited him too. I said, okay, I don't know anything about White Swan. I know very little. And but when a lieutenant colonel of the U.S. Army invites you to dinner, you know, you kind of have to go. It was interesting. It was an interesting invitation, and he was a nice man. Oh gosh, he was very courteous, very, his approach to wanting to know more about White Swan was of interest, deep, deep interest. And I don't like to really share a whole lot of information with people who just think it's trivial matter. But with him, during our conversation and our dinner, I knew that he was genuinely interested in this man, so I said I'll try to help you as much as I can. And of course, so did Adrian. And he wrote a book called White Swan, Bilacia, White Swan. And this whole book is about him. So this little known man, now a storyteller, an artist, a warrior, has a book written about him. There's a library named after him. And all of a sudden, lately, all of his relatives came around. They knew they were related, but they just didn't mention it too often. Several years ago, in an obituary in Billings Gazette, I read that there was a organization of Bilacia's relatives. I told this man about it, but we couldn't find where the organization originated or who started it. But we've got kind of a whiff of it now, and we're going to get that band together and have them get interested in the Battle of the Little Bighorn. So I'm hoping that something will come out of that. But that's am I 5 minutes up? Okay, that's my experience with White Swan. Thank you.
Kind of be thinking of questions. We're going to have some time at the end for questions for the panelists here. So, but just hold your questions till after the end here. Again, thank you, Mardell, for all that information. I was also blessed and honored to work with our next panelist here. He also comes from the Crow Nation, Vernon White Man, descendant of one of the Custer's scouts. He's also a current rancher too. Really learned a lot, from Mardell, but also Vernon as well. Just really knowledgeable people here. But I'll turn this over to Vernon at this time.
Like he mentioned, my name is Vernon J. White Man Runshim. I come from a large family here, just north of the border here on a reservation. Been there all my life. And I was brought up by my uncle most of the time. My dad was a politician for the Crow tribe and spent a lot of time back east. So I had to run with my Uncle Joe Medicine Crow as one of the well-known historians in our tribe and the nation, actually. And we spent a lot of time when I was young traveling around different parts of the reservation and different parts of the country, finding out how our tribe and other tribes all developed clear up to this day, you know. And so I got a lot of different versions of what happened, who was there. We go into the Cheyenne country and talk to some of the old participants in the history of the Battle of the Little Bighorn. And so we spent a lot of time getting information when I was a young fella, with Joe absorbing all that, and eventually wrote a book about, one of his books was a return of the Battle of the Little Bighorn. And that's where we get a lot of our information in our tribe, as well as letting everybody in the country get a hold of this book and look at it and see what we accumulated as far as the development and aftermath of the Battle of the Little Bighorn. So our great-grandfather, White Man Runs Him, he was a scout with the rest of the crew there at Little Bighorn Battlefield. And I guess actually my grandfather was a quiet, reserved man. And we've always lived right across the reservation line, and our family is still there, getting larger all the time. And we kind of leaned on Joe Medicine Crow to give us a little information of our own. But he published a lot of different aspects of how this battle developed and where the scouts all participated in that, and actually didn't get into the fight. Crows weren't involved really in the battle. It was between the Cheyennes and everybody else. But history-wise, like White Man Runs Him himself was a interpreter for the tribe mostly, and he kind of put out a lot of history of the different versions of the reservation and Crow life. And White Man Runs Him and White Swan and them fellows put out a certain amount of information, the actual battle and life after that battle. So a lot of this history has never been really written down, and we have a pretty good idea in our own minds of how it all proceeded and the aftermath of the Little Bighorn. We actually live right in amongst that battle area, and we grew up with it. It's natural for us to see a lot of things that it's kind of what we call off the beaten path. And if we get out and do some visiting around, see different families and get their version of what those proceedings were after, up to and during the battle, and how we all ended up in history of where we all live and what we all do as different families. And we can all tell stories about that battle of Little Bighorn, and like White Man Runs Him, done a lot of politicking way back in the old days when they were developing the reservation and going to Washington himself, and like I say, he was a kind of a number one, number two, number three man, and then interpreting in the language that they were developing to govern ourselves and have the government tell us what to do, I guess. But you can see where all these types of people put their versions together and come up with the way we govern ourselves and participate with the non-Indians. So, living with Joe all my life, we get different areas of different parts of the reservation, who did what on this side of the reservation, and even when we came to be Crow Indians, from the time that they left the Great Lakes area and into Canada in their migration of where they were going to settle down. Then they went into the tribe itself went into the Great Salt Lake area, and that didn't suit us. The water wasn't very good, hot, and all that kind of stuff, you know. So in this migration, couple hundred years in the making, and ended up down in the Platte River area south of us, and eventually worked their way to the east a little bit, and then headed north again. Like Joe always says, down at that Platte River, he said it's a good thing we turned north. If we turned south, we'd be down there eating beans, you know. And he said we came up to this side of the mountain and ended up right here in this area. So one of the main things that we kept in history was we have different clans on the reservation, and we have a tobacco society, and they actually planted some of their medicine tobacco right here in one of these little draws, and that's the area we still talk about. And I think we had it pretty well pegged down with the people that live around or were around at the time that the Crows ended up here. So this was home here. And through the years, then we scattered out in family clusters. And White Man runs his family. We ended up matching up with the Yellowtail family. So that took up most of the southern part of the reservation as our family, between the Yellowtails and the White Man runs him people. We have reunions and stuff like that. And we can eat a buffalo and a beef, and in our little camps when we have these get-togethers for the families. And we tell stories of each other, but Joe always had an eye out for stories that people told, and he wrote a number of books, and they're all available nowadays, written by Joe Medicine Crow. And then we went into my mother's family, and that, like I say, took up most of the southern part of the reservation. So it's kind of interesting to see these old authors and what they put together in these books, and Joe was one of the main ones that put his words down on paper. And when they come to the Battle of the Bighorn, Little Bighorn, well, it's just kind of a version of all the family stories, how that all was put together, and different versions of where each family was at the time of the big battle, and where they ended up. And they even tried to get into Canada after the battle, and so the stories are pretty much put together in those old-time books, old authors, and I guess one of the best ones is, like I say, Joe Medicine Crow wrote his books, and by the time he finally passed away, he was pretty well known by everybody on this part of the United States. He died at 103 years old, still telling stories that he had heard years before, all the accumulation stuff that he put together. But he was fortunate enough to get enough information and put it on books. And if you look under Joe Medicine Crow as an author, you'll see the number of those books that he put together before his time was up. He died in 2016, which is not long ago. So a lot of my family were, they lived forever, Doc. I don't know how a family could have so many people at 100 years old. And looks like guys like me, I'm headed for 100 too, but we'll see how far it goes. I guess all my brothers and my sisters are getting up there where they know everything that they've heard all their life. And we're climbing at 90 years old and 80, 90 years old, which had never even a thought of us when we grew up. We just lived with what we hear and what we've seen. And guys like me, I worked for the Crow tribe for a large part of my life. I got into the tribal business and worked with a natural resource program for 30 years. I ran a program for about half of them years. I managed the muffalo, I managed the fish and game, youth programs. So I did a lot of things in my life, but I never thought I'd, be around to share a lot of stories with everybody else around, whether it was white or Indian. So my family ended up to be farmers and ranchers using our own properties, and we're still there today. We have a creek there where we all live between Lodgegrass and Wyola, call it Alligator Creek. I don't know where the word alligator ever came from in the Crow language. So we just lived with the words that were interpreted, and we ended up Alligator Creek. And we're still there. Most of my family is within a rock throwing distance of each other, and it's been home. We see a lot of things, especially in our mountain where we ran our buffalo and our cattle. And there's history on those mountains that the ordinary person doesn't get to see, but we could tell stories different things up there on that mountain. And when you go to the mountain, by golly, you're getting closer to God. We spent a lot of time up there all summer, and that's where your heart kind of absorbs why that area is put up in there, where history's all over up there, and we bring it down here and kind of try to get it instilled in our children. So when you get to the age like a guy like me, I've got a lot of kids. So when you can look out and see 11 grandkids, 11 great-grandkids, and everybody right around this area between Hardin and state line, we're scattered all through there. And like I say, history-wise, we kind of rely on the older scholars that got to go to college and had good jobs and put out the words in black and white. And nowadays it's kind of getting on the wayside, just like anything else. We talk about the moon and the Mars and places like that too, but our reservation's still here, our people are still here, and we get to intermingle with everybody else. And that's probably the best part of growing up on this reservation was we get to love everybody. And we depend on God to give us inspiration of what this earth is about. So we try to tell our youth that. And I didn't get much history of white man Ermsett myself, but my grandpa was right there living right amongst us too, and I'd bring him to Sheridan all the time and get his coal and let him hang around town of Sheridan. And then on the way home, I'd have to listen to him tell stories of everyday life of what they did. They got to see the life of wagon wheels and horse herds, but we really didn't have any agriculture farmers and ranchers in the reservation, and our family is one of the few farmers, actual farmers and ranchers. We put up a lot of grain, a lot of hay, and we raised a lot of cattle. And like I say, everything else, we raised a lot of kids too. So we're kind of proud of being able to send our kids to school. We have a lot of grandkids and great-grandkids getting into the colleges and letting them absorb some of the history that we as a family, we have a lot of possessions of our own that we keep next to our heart and home. And you don't appreciate it until you get pretty old. And I see all of us guys that used to run around and go places and do things that we eventually inherit the idea of what the life is about. So I see a lot of people that we grew up with. We all got a cane. We walk with a cane, and like me, let somebody push me around. like I say, I depended a lot on what Joe Medicine Crow and the L.K. family told us as stories. And it's, like I say, it's good to get out and see what those books and history-wise, what that all was written, and see what it is in everyday life for us. So it's good to come down here and see where we started. And we're still here, I guess. And maybe a lot of us will leave a pretty good mark, hoping somebody else will replace us. So you can see where we started right here on this reservation. And kind of, that's a special place for us in our heart. And there's a lot of things out there you can get a hold of and read the histories. And like I say, there's a certain number of people spend their life writing those down. And I guess that's what we depend on. Besides, our old people are gone, so it's up to guys like us to visit and talk to people every day. And that's just a little idea of what we live as a family and as what we heard in history. And we cherish that. That's about the best I could say right at the moment. So, thank you.
Thank you, Vernon. White man, again, descendant of White Man Runs Him. I was really fortunate to hear that story of how that name came to be, White Man Runs Him. So, yeah, really thank Vernon for that. So, real quick, any Brinton staff here, stand up. Just kind of want to acknowledge, recognize our Brinton Museum staff here. We got Will over there. Yeah. Kendra, yeah, director. Board of trustee members, I see a couple here. You want to stand real quick? I don't know if there's some. Oh, hey, David. Hey, David's here. All right. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, just, enjoy, relax. That's how our oral stories are told. We'd sit around the dinner table, sit around the fire, just kind of sit back and enjoy these stories, So, and again, there'll be time for questions after this. Our next speaker will keep the show moving here. Donovan Sprague, member of the Minneconjou Lakota, descendant of Hump, who was a mentor to Crazy Horse. And of course, he's a professor at Sheridan College. So I'll turn the time over to him at this time. Thank you, Don.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to be here among some of my relatives here and friends and visitors here. Really pleased to be here in a great setting, very historic. My Lakota name is Chinkahu Wakontia. It translates to high backbone, and that's where the buffalo hump comes from. It was General Miles was asking the interpreter what that word meant, and he said it's a hump on the buffalo where he gets his strength and energy, and after that it was Miles who pretty much referred to him as Chief Hump after that, but originally called high backbone, and also a lot of people don't know the two names, so they'll think they're two different people. I see that in books all the time, And I have a book that I worked on for 20 years, and it's been done for 7 years. It's called High Backbone, Hump, and Crazy Horse, Lakota Cheyenne History from a Family View. And so all of the information about our side of the family is in that book through the use of winter counts. recording most important event of the year on a hide, as many of you know. But I have one from my own family that the world does not know about. It goes back to 1680, and so that's why my book starts in 1680. Had to explain to the academic world, about footnotes and things like that. Well, this is a winter count. They want to know, well, which book is that from? And we didn't have books, we drew. So anyway, I look at this, 150th is really an important event for the tribes, but I also respect, I learned this quite a while back, that on the other side, there are people that may not celebrate it as much. If you're on the losing side, for instance, so we probably look at that as a celebration, but also a reflection, for some to look back upon that. And so the 150th is really important, as is every anniversary year. As mentioned earlier, Joe Medicine Crow, I was up at the 125th anniversary as a speaker with him. He was right by me, and so it don't seem like it's been 25 years, and here we go again. I got about 4 presentations up there on the 25th itself, right on the battlefield, and I'm really proud of the participation that my family endured there, and the ways that they defended our people, starting from right after Sand Creek. All of the events that happened right up and down the Bozeman Trail, participate in every one of those. And, it's real important that we have ceremonies too, and we have our medicine men and people like Sitting Bull, but when I was thinking about this, our family really represented the kind of the muscle and the power behind all this. Somebody has to go take arms and stop this force. Otherwise, I worked for the 5 civilized tribes too, the Choctaw. But, and I work in Indiana with a tribe that was they had their own Trail of Tears, but a lot of them were forced march, and you never seen us forced march nowhere. That's one difference between our family and our warriors than those that went about. So Crazy Horse being an important part of our world, and actually connected to Sitting Bull too through his nephews, One Bull and White Bull, and then through my relatives here right beside me. I'd like to acknowledge my cousin here, Dana, from my family, and I'm also connected to the Cheyenne with Linwood's family, and all of our men that I'm going to mention briefly married Cheyenne. So our men all married into the Cheyenne tribe. So it's kind of confusing. We have Cheyenne River Sioux tribe is a modern name, and we have 4 of the Lakota bands there, but these people who were veterans of the battle and all that, after they came in to the agencies, and they weren't really surrenders because they weren't accompanied by soldiers. They came in, and then they to talk about a deal. That's what it was. And so somehow I've got to figure out another word for and not use surrender, because of the proud heritage. And even Crazy Horse expected an agency. He was told that there would be likely an agency in the Powder River country, and from riding and traveling all this area, I think the center of that agency might have been about where Gillette is. The Pumpkin Buttes were really important symbolically, but also a landmark and guide for a lot of areas. clear out to the Bighorns here, being able to visit, that being visible, and way to the south, and on, I guess before mining too, they said you could see the Bear Lodge. Anybody been to Bear Lodge lately? Also known as Devil's Tower. Before mining, it was visible over there. But yeah, with our men then, we had the people that fought to the very end. Then I'll mention 5 from our family, and they came in April and May, less than a year after the battle. So 1877, April and May, we had what some call these surrenders, but they weren't escorted anywhere. So they didn't want the 5 together. So Crazy Horse was sent to the Red Cloud Agency in present Nebraska. It's Fort Robinson, which I was just down there recently, and they've evacuated it. The fires are terrible down there right now. And they sent Touch the Cloud from our family, Minikoju, to the Spotted Tail Agency, which became real home for the Sichongu, or they call them burnt thigh brulee also. But he was over there, and he got permission later to come home to Cheyenne River a few years later. And he also had all Cheyenne wives, you know, and Hump then, he came into the Tongue River cantonment at Miles City, and Miles is over there. And the other one from up here was Lame Deer. And through a chain of events that happened, well, he was killed south of Lame Deer, and that's a whole story there in itself. But a lot of those descendants that we come from there were the Flying By family that ended up over at Hunkpapa of country of Standing Rock. And then the other side is Morning Star. They sent him to, well, Indian Territory, becomes Oklahoma, back and forth. That's another whole saga there of his life. So the wives of my great-great-grandfather, Hump, sometimes also known as the son of Hump, who fought at the Little Bighorn, he was 26 years old. And so he was, I brought a couple things in here. I wasn't sure how the setup was, but I did bring in a picture of him on the left here with 2 of his Cheyenne wives. And so this is, this was taken 2 years after the Little Bighorn battle. It's a Huffman picture, L.A. Huffman, up at Miles City, photographed him. And the other thing I brought in as kind of a prop too, I went to Monroe, Michigan, the adopted hometown of Custer, and when I left, the Custer family that's living over there, they gave me this bow. So I thought, well, I had to bring this in, because I went clear to Timber Lake, South Dakota, to the museum where this is, and I have it on loan over there. So since I have some speaking engagements, I wanted to share this. But anyway, the widows brought this back from Fort Abraham Lincoln as their men were all gone. And this bow was picked up out here. They don't know whose it is, but it's a display item over at the museum. So sometimes I bring a bow on the airplane and people get nervous. So I noticed a couple of you were kind of uneasy when I walked by you with my bow. But anyway, with the April and May surrenders or coming into the agency, that ended the wars. There was nobody out here at that time. That was it. That's when the white settlement came in, and our agencies were all created then. The Red Cloud Agency moved 4 times. It became Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota the 4th time. The Spotted Tail Agency moved 4 times, became Rosebud Reservation. And then our Cheyenne River was created, and to the north of us, we border Standing Rock on the north of us, which overlaps into North Dakota. And Lower Brule is the other Lakota. They're all West River, South Dakota, 5 reservations. And so that effectively put us out of all of this historic area that was talked about by the next generation. And so you couldn't leave the reservation. You had to have permission or whatever, and a lot of restrictions against religion, dancing, all of that. And they were affected by that. And later, like Sitting Bull went to Canada, and he stayed up there. And then Hump also went to Canada. And so he had another second surrender in 1881. And now I'll be over at Fort Laramie on the 4th of July. Everybody wants fireworks. So, but anyway, the thing about that, they always talk about, well, treaty signer. Yeah, your family signed a treaty. Well, because our family, they didn't sign any treaty, Hump and Crazy Horse. You won't find their name on any treaty document. And so because of that, my grandfather Hump had 14 more years of freedom. But he just lived the old way. And the agent then eventually, when they surrendered, like when Sitting Bull come in, the agent up there, McGillicuddy, he was going to stop their ghost dance. They were both ghost dancers, Sitting Bull and Hump. And he did by killing them, sent some of his own relatives, Sitting Bull's own relatives, as Indian police, in a highly volatile situation. He was killed. Same story on our reservation. Our agent reports say he wasn't as fierce, I guess, as McGillicuddy. His reports say, well, we fear Hump. We don't want to go out and get him mad. He's over in that Cherry Creek area, remote area, and he's not harming anyone. He's not committing any depredations, so let him be. So he continued to practice ghost dance, and he continued at a place in the Badlands called the Stronghold. And he went up into an area called Slim Buttes, where the Slim Buttes battle later was with Anson Mills came in there, and Crook. But anyway, that's about 80 miles off our reservation. So he was continually violating all that, those rules, but they just let him be. And so in 1905, Touch the Cloud died, and in 1908, Hump died, and about exactly a year after, almost to the day, 1909 in December, Red Cloud died as well. And then you had people like from other tribes leaving, Geronimo, Chief Joseph, a real end of an era there that never came back. Then you had a new group of people that went to Washington, and then they're all chiefs, and the elders come, they see the elders back home, and they'll say, yeah, that family never was a head man, A Washington chief was different than traditional, So anyway, that's just a little bit of information. I spent most of my life in the education university system, the Tribal College, Oglala Lakota College, Black Hills State University, University of Iowa, Iowa State, University of Northern Iowa, University of Wyoming, Cheyenne, and now Sheridan College last 5 years. So they want to keep me up here, so they give me a house and meal ticket, so I hadn't missed any meals and stuff. So it's really nice to be able to live and hang out at these historic areas and ride these places and I've been to all these sites, and I'll talk to anybody who will visit with me about the history. I've been up on top horseback, right up above Story there, looked off the other side, and there's just a lot of things, been involved in here with the medicine wheel, and here's a kind of a correction thing too. It was high backbone Hump the father who was a leader at the Fetterman and Wagon Box. And his son was not old enough to be like a headman then. So my great-great-grandfather, here, there's no picture of his father, but anyway, he was 16 over there. So see, that's a big anniversary too, the 160th for the Fetterman in Fort Phil Kearney. And then also the Rosebud coming up. They were at all those places, except one thing I noticed in some of the observation recognition, I noticed recognizing all tribes who were family participants over at the battle where sister saved her brother, Rosebud, and I don't think they know what the Cheyenne River bands are. There are 4 there, because there was no mention of them in any recognition. They mentioned Pine Ridge and Oglala's and Standing Rock, and I don't know if Rosebud is mentioned, then all the neighboring tribes, but we're Minikoju, Itazipcho, Sihasapa, and Uhueyanumpa. That's 4 of the 7 right there are at Cheyenne River. The pipe is also there, the sacred white buffalo calf pipe, and they're also have a lot of planning for all that. This past weekend, I was at 2-day planning session in Rapid City with several of the tribes and parks, and there's going to be a lot of riders there. A lot of riders are coming right now from reservations. So, Wopila.
Yeah, thank you, Donovan. Thank you very much. The Northern Cheyennes were real close with the Minneconjou, also the Ogallala as well. We were camped close to each other on that Little Bighorn, 150 years ago. I'll turn the time over to Dana Dupree. Again, comes to us from Cheyenne River as well. We have him down as 43 years working with Lakota culture preservation. Again, he serves on the Brinton Museum, American Indian Advisory Council. Here you go, Dana.
Thank you. I got noticed to come here and talk about Amos Badhardbull. He's Ogallala. I said, scratched his head over here and said, I'm not Ogallala though. So I have to do something. So on the way from 3 hours of driving, my wife was driving. I was writing things, trying to be a tourist. But hopefully I don't mess up on this one. But I, as was mentioned, I did a lot of work, a lot of history. And when I was a young boy, there was a teacher. His name was Badhardbull, and he's from Pine Ridge. And it was at a boarding school setting on our reservation in Cheyenne River, Eagle Butte, South Dakota. And he was a really knowledgeable person. He was the cultural teacher. And that's probably where I gathered interest in recording or learning about history. And when I kind of thought about it, a lot of things make sense, That was in early 60s, I started boarding school. And then in high school in the 70s, we got to meet this family, and they're really, really wonderful people. They took care of us, and they taught us a lot of things. So with this assignment of, I think downstairs in the exhibit, there's 10 drawings, ledger drawings. And then I said, oh, I thought there was just one. There's 10 of them. What's going on? So I almost turned around and went home. But since I'm here. But he was 7 years old, Amos. His name was Amos Bad Heart. 7 years old at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. And his father, Bad Heart Bull, was a historian, a tribal historian. So he followed that path. But, you know, from being able to witness what, I guess he actually didn't witness the shooting or the fighting, but after that, he learned from his relatives, the elders, the uncles, the cousins, or whoever was fighting there, and he learned those stories. And then I think in 1877, as my relative mentioned, Crazy Horse brought his people into the fort, and then Bad Heart Bull brought his family also. And then when Crazy Horse was killed, Bad Heart Bull, they fled to Spotted Tail Agency, which was probably to the east. And then from there, they didn't feel safe, so they fled up into Canada to join Sitting Bull. And then eventually in 1880, they came back. And I think my relative said they didn't surrender, but they came back to a fort, and there's an 1881 census of those that surrendered, and they have all their names. They took them, some of them they took them downriver, and wherever they landed, they were imprisoned. You know, they were put into prison, and then later on they were put on agencies or reservations. So after that period of time, then the Bad Heart Bull family ended up in Standing Rock. And then eventually he returned back to Pine Ridge. And so he made a circle. And with that, in 1890, Amos was a scout, a U.S. scout. And so he helped the cavalry. And then a couple of years later, he became a rancher. And so from that, he started to, I think in 1890 as a scout, when he was around the fort, he happened to find a ledger drawing type of a paper that was used by the accountants to keep track of the orders. And so he was one of the artists that started the ledger drawing artwork. And so that was his interest. And then he died in, I believe, in 1913. So then his collection was given to his younger sister. And I think I wrote her name down because there's too many names here. So and I can't read my writing. I apologize. Oh, Dorothy, I think her name was. Oh, Dolly Purdy Cloud. That's why I couldn't remember that name. And Dolly Purdy Cloud. So all his collection was given to his sister. And then after she died, or I guess before she died, there was a friend, a lady that spent 3 years on the reservation, and she must have been around the family, and she found out about this ledger art, and so she asked to use that collection in her master thesis at the University of Nebraska. And so with permission, she wrote a master's thesis using the Amos Bad Heart Bull ledger drawing collection. And later on, after the death of Dolly, there was interest in trying to retrieve that collection or gain possession of it. But unfortunately for the art collectors, this collection was buried with Dolly. And so even as late as 1959, they requested to recover those ledger drawings, that collection. And so you think about in that collection was 407 drawings of that nature, you know. And so that's why I was overwhelmed when I was downstairs. I said, oh, I thought there was just one, you know. And my eyes start going this way and that way. And I'm an artist, but I think last time I talked, I said I was a con artist. But anyway. But there's a collection that was printed. I think it cost $95, but it's 300 pages of his drawings. And then there's, I guess, a breakdown of where there was part of his collection was before Oglala life, before 1856. And then, oh, don't get mad, Colas, conflicts with the Crow, 1856 to 1875. And then 1876 was the Battle of Little Bighorn, and then up until 1903, life of the Oglala. So that's the eras or the time frame that all these drawings addressed. And so, you know, with that, I just want to share that with you because, you know, that's pretty impressive. I have, in my house, I have sketchbooks all over. I read books and I write, and like Donovan, I'm not there with a book. If I wrote a book, it'd be this thin. But I really enjoyed that, you know, reviewing the art or, you know, I guess studying art. And 40 years ago when I was working, I had a job. First I graduated from art school, believe it or not, from Santa Fe, New Mexico. And then I had to get a job. They said, you can't go to school no more. You got to do something. So they created a job for me back home. And all you have to do is just travel all over the United States. Okay, I could do that. That's a good job. For 1 year, maybe a year and a half, I went to museums after museums, week at a time, looking at Native American collections. And some people had big collections. Some had small collections. And I went to Detroit, and they had, I think it was a art museum, Institute of Art. Anyway, that's where I came in contact with some ledger drawings. And there was a whole big collection of them. And today I was thinking maybe that's that collection they were after. They probably dug it up and sold it to the museum. I don't know, but I'm going to research it. Because every tribe has a place where they sell their goods. So when I asked where Detroit got their collection from, they said, oh, we covered the Rosebud Reservation. And then up in Bend, Oregon, they said, oh, we covered the Crow Nation. Over in California and San Francisco, oh, they covered the Oglalas. And, you know, different places. Boston, they covered everybody. There's like 10,000 items. And when that day, me and my coworker were in Boston, you know, they took us to a class, and they introduced us from Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe, and we stood up, there was two of us. They kind of clapped a little bit. And from the Pueblo Nation, And they had 30 of them, big delegation, their chiefs and war chiefs, peace chiefs. Wow. But that day they repatriated 30,000 human remains, because at that time they want to study what goes on in our brains of the Indian warrior. So it was an order that once you kill somebody on the battle, you send their heads to the museum so we can study their brains. So when we were given a tour of the museum, we went in this big warehouse, probably twice the size, 3 times the size of this room. And there were little metal baskets. And that curator said, "Oh, you guys, Cheyenne River, okay, you guys are right here." And our human remains are all stacked up. And then, it didn't feel good, you know. And those human remains are still there because, you know, it takes work, it takes time to bring them home. That day we seen the Pueblos, they went and repatriated 300 or 30,000, I guess. So that's kind of a sad history. We went to another museum, and a lot of times when you go and get items, they'll say, "Oh, okay, we found this, it doesn't have no value to us." You guys want this? We went to Boston, outside of Boston. We got a pipe that came from our tribe in 1866. And at that time was time of war. And they sent 2 men from our reservation in South Dakota to Washington, D.C. to make peace with the president. And the president didn't want to, spend time with that, so he delegated one of his, the Secretary, Interior, and then, or Department of War, I guess at that time. But anyway, so when our people got to D.C., there was other tribes doing the same thing. So they got busy, so they said, "Okay, here, this guy can help you." And so pretty soon, our pipe didn't go to where it's supposed to be. To make peace, it went on a mantle of somebody, one of the officers. And over the years, these people start dying, the family members start dying mysteriously. Because that pipe was connected, it was active. Whenever you point that pipe, it's dangerous. Ooh. So then they found out and they say, "Hey, you Cheyenne River, you guys want this pipe back?" Too many people died, we don't want no more people to die. So we went over there, me and my friend, and we flew into a blizzard, through a blizzard, and there was only one landing strip open in the Boston airport. And we flew in, landed, went over to that museum. Next morning, we were supposed to leave at 2 in the afternoon, but they changed our flight. So we got back on that plane, and one landing strip was open, and the blizzard closed up. We went home. But the sad story is that when that curator was digging around the shelves, he said, "Oh, guys, we don't need this. It's of no value to us. Here, you guys want this? It's a necklace." So we said, "Oh, okay, sure." But it was finger bone from here to here. Finger bone of children of the Santee. They declared bounty on our people because we didn't come on the reservation. We didn't surrender. So you think about a grown person killing a little baby just to get $100, and they have to prove it by cutting off their little finger bone. So we took them home, and we had ceremony, and then within 4 days, Santee came and took their people home. But that was very stressful. That's why I got out of that business. Because there's a lot of museums. There's 500 museums in the United States, federal museums that have collections of our tribes. So this ledger art is really historic. You know, it shows, gives you an idea of what happened, you know, during that day, June 26th. I just want to share that with you, and thank you for your time.
Good job, Dana. So some of these have traveled pretty far, and I know Dana's one of them. And I know he came with some of the horse riders too. They're on Highway 212 right now, I believe, getting close to Belle-Fourche there, but making their way this way. So, watch out. No. All right, our next storyteller here comes from Northern Cheyenne. He's chief headsman of the Dog Soldier Society. Cheyenne name is Hutnehis, translates to young wolf. Again, real knowledgeable about our medicinal plants, stories, history. Mr. Linwood Tauble.
Aho. It means thank you. My name is Linwood Tauble. I'm presently teaching at the Chief Dullknife College. I and my son. I turned my ethnobotany to him because I wasn't into climbing hills anymore. And he's a fourth generation ethnobotanist. This belonged to the woman originally, but the woman chose not to take it. They kind of gave up on that. The women were the ones that handed down plant knowledge. They're the ones that taught survival skills. And when women's liberation came about, they all quit. I guess the men was probably making more money than them, whatever that was. But my father was a storyteller, a historian, and when he was 8 years old, him and his brother went to live with his grandparents, Ellen Brady and Arthur Brady. Arthur Brady lived to be 102 years old. He was an arrow maker for Little Wolf's band, Jitistas. Well, Ellen Brady was a medicine woman, and she specialized in cancer, of how to treat cancer. And so she taught my father all about plant knowledge and stuff. And she would take him out, go with him out into the hills, and when she became blind, he would lead her and she would explain the plant and the things that she had to get. And this was given to my father. On his death, he gave it to me. And we're passing it on because my society, the society that I'm in, headsman in, is the head dogmen, Hidamatani, not dog soldier, dogmen. One of the original ancient societies. And my great-great-grandfather was killed in Summit Springs, Colorado. A descendant of his son, they always say it was a girl, but it was a guy. He fought at the Custer Battle. Tauble. His Christian name became Jacob Tauble. His horse was shot 7 times on the Custer Hill before it finally collapsed. And he continued to fight hand to hand with the soldiers. The Cheyenne history, the history that we try to save, that's what our society does. We're going to try to save it for those children that aren't born yet. And we have a very rich history, and there's a lot of sadness in it. The Cheyennes had more villages destroyed than all the Western tribes put together. They did this in the winter time. They burnt the villages down. Many times the children, when they hid their children, some of them in tunnels, in a brush. They put logs over them, sticks over them, so those cavalry horses would jump over. They made the children wear their moccasins at night because they never could trust the soldiers. They always came in the wintertime. There's a lot of really bad things that happened. Sand Creek Massacre was one of them. This is where they mutilated all the bodies, a lot of the bodies. Cut open the woman and took the babies out and scattered their bodies all over. When Ellen Brady would talk about this, she would cry, my dad would say. She was also involved in 1868 at the Washita River, where Black Kettle, he was a peace chief. He even had an American flag in front of his teepee. He even had a white flag. But Custer, for some reason, he had been humiliated in the regular war, and he wanted to get some recognition. So the 7th Cavalry, 700 of them, attacked Black Kettle's village in the early morning, about 4 o'clock, while they were sleeping. And they played the song, Gary Owen. I don't like that song. When I hear it, there's a great sadness that comes over me. See, my father was farmed out as a child because his mother couldn't take care of him. He stayed with 3 different chiefs. Frank Pine, that lived up the Kirby Valley. He had the ring of Tom Custer. There was TC written on it. And he said, Tom Custer was my friend. He gave me this. Well, we know better than that. He probably had a sharp hatchet too. But in the evenings, when the sun was towards the late evenings, they would tell my father, since he was kind of a chore boy, he would chop wood and carry water and stuff, and they said, build a fire. Go get a bunch of wood, get a bucket of water and a dipper. My friends are coming. When the sun would start to go down, these warriors would come out of the hills. They would hobble their horses with gunny sacks. How many of you ever hobbled your horse with a gunny sack? Well, that's the only hobbles they had. So they could always use it for anything else too, but they would hobble their horses, and then they would take their blankets and spread them around the fire. And each one of these, they would pick a topic. And a lot of their stuff has never been written down because they didn't want to share it. That's why oral traditions is such a big thing. It means something. You listen here. He would lay there by the fire and listen to these stories. I traced many of his stories given to him by them old men, warriors that came in. The Indian people, everybody called us uncivilized. They never thought we had any kind of history that tied them to the Bible or anything. But every miracle that's in your Bible, we have been there. The great flood, feeding of the multitudes, dividing of the waters, we've been there. The Cheyenne language is Algonquin. It dates back 6,000 to 10,000 BC. It is one of the oldest languages. the Mormons call us one of the 7 lost tribes of Israel. We are holding on to our language through our culture committee and our colleges. We're teaching, I'm teaching Indian stories and legends right now in a college. My son is doing the ethnobotany. But going back to that 1868, when that Black Kettles village was destroyed, him and his wife were both killed. And after a while, the fire the battle just came to just a standstill because a lot of the scouts was getting angry for what the soldiers were doing to the Indian people. And they eventually just left. And Custer was involved in that mutilation and things like that. So in 1869, they had a chief's council. The Sacred Arrow priest, keeper, was also there. They invited General Custer. He was going to make peace for the United States Army. He showed up. Stone forehead, loaded his pipe. When you load a pipe, you pray then. You tell why you're doing that or whatever. Then you give it to him and light it. Well, Stone Forehead loaded this pipe and gave it to Custer. And Custer promised, he made a promise. He said, I or my soldiers will never attack your camp or hurt your people again. So they lit the pipe, and Custer smoked it. And before they were going to leave, when Custer got done with the pipe, one of the people told him that the pipe was very sacred, and you have to follow your words. Well, as Custer got up, Stone Forehead took his pipe cleaner and he scraped the inside of the sacred redstone pipe. And he dumped the ashes on Custer's heel and says, if you ever attack the Cheyennes again, you're going to turn into ashes. Your soldiers are going to turn into ashes. That could have been the downfall of Custer. We believe it was, but it goes further than that. When the Cheyennes and Crazy Horse's village got destroyed, they were living close together. And when the Cheyennes went to Crazy Horse didn't have any. He said, my people are poor. Look what they've done to us. I have no horses. We have no extra things to give you. He says, but take your elders, take your chiefs, and have them take their pipe to Sitting Bull. Sitting Bull wasn't a chief. He was a powerful medicine man. Says he has the greatest following. So the 3 chiefs took their pipes to Sitting Bull. He took them. He didn't answer them for 3 days. On the 3rd day, he called the Lakota bands together. And he said, we're going to help the Cheyenne people get their food, get their hides for their teepees, catch them horses, get a whole bunch of meat so that they can survive the winter. He says they're gonna lead us to the Little Bighorn, some people call it Sheep Creek. They're gonna lead us, Sitting Bull said. He said, the Cheyennes will lead us. I will be in the back My other 6 bands will be in the middle. No one will get ahead of the Cheyennes. No one will get behind me. As they came up, that's when he had his magnificent, or this very spiritual dance. White Bull, one of our medicine men, painted him. He cut 100 pieces of flesh from Sitting Bulls, each arm, that he gave as a gift. This is what the Indian people do in their ceremonies. And he was bleeding pretty bad. He gave him a white horse that he had painted with special symbols on it. As they sang a song in Sitting Bull, held the horse, blood was dripping from his fingers. They sang this sacred song. And as Sitting Bull danced, that white horse danced with him. And the people were very amazed of why that horse was doing that. His vision became a thing, a real thing, where he saw soldiers falling from the sky like locusts. We know where that site is, by Medicine Deer Rock. And as they came up the valley, Crazy Horse stayed at where Busby, the town of Busby is. That was Crazy Horse, that's Sitting Bull's camp. The Ogallala was a close brother. They always stayed next to the Cheyenne. This is when the Battle of Rosebud came up. The chiefs told them not to. They didn't want to fight. But all the chiefs snuck out that night and took their sons with them. They painted their horses. They wanted to watch their sons go to battle. Many of the Lakota people, they took their sons out to battle, or they went to battle. Only one Cheyenne man was killed at the Battle of Rosebud. His name was Yellow's son. No, it was Black Son, excuse me. Moktabe Ishe. He was the only one that was naked. He was painted completely yellow, but he had a blanket around his waist. One of the Crow scouts shot him in the back, and he was the only fatality that we had at the Battle of Rosebud. But Crook went on back into Sheridan because of all the wounded men he had. And the Cheyennes came back and they celebrated over a young man that had really honored himself there. But they took the yellow man, Black Son, and buried him with honors. And then they went on into the valley of the Little Bighorn. They didn't realize that Custer was behind them. Well, what happened was Chief Little Wolf and his band didn't want to fight anymore. They wanted peace. Chief Dullknife also wanted peace. So they went to the Red Cloud Agency, and when they got there, all the Sioux were gone. The Lakota were gone. So Little Wolf tried to catch up with them. He ran his horses. They moved as fast as they could to try to catch up. And they didn't realize that they knew that there was fallen some kind of soldier because of the horseshoes. So they sent their scouts way ahead, and as they got to Busby, they went towards the Little Bighorn, and they stopped at a place called Crow's Nest. This was where they were supposed to hide until the next day when Crook came and the other general came up on the steamship called Far West. He was coming up the Yellowstone. They were going to meet all together to surround the Indians. Well, as they were going to the crow's nest, they had stopped to eat. And what happened was they had lost a box of crackers off of their meal, and it fell to the ground. Nobody paid attention to it, I guess. But they went on. When they got to their crow's nest to hide, to camp, they found their missing crackers. They noticed the crackers were missing. So they sent a sergeant and his detachment back. And he rode up on 3 of Little Wolf's scouts. He didn't know they were Little Wolf's scouts. They were eating them crackers. One was named Red Cherries. The next one was Black Horse. And the third one was Medicine Bull. They were the scouts of Little Wolf. Well, this is the turning point of the battle. When the soldiers took their box back and told about the Indians that were eating the crackers, Custer felt that the surprise, his attack, to coordinate everything, he thought he was already discovered. This is why General Custer marched all night into the battle at Little Bighorn. Before they came, the Indian people had a celebration there. And 5 of the Cheyennes gave their lives to the next battle. These were the suicide warriors. They were the ones, they were killed or fatally wounded on the Custer Hill. We got their names marked there. Hard Hand, Closed Fist, or Limber Hand. Cut Belly, Noisy Walking, and Little Whirlwind. Those were the 5 suicide warriors. It was an honor to become one of them. It honored their families for them to give their life like that. We only had 7 Cheyennes killed at the Custer Battle. Hump Nose, the friend of Wooden Legs, was killed on a river when they were chasing the soldiers across. The Southern Cheyenne chief, lame white man, was in a sweat with his friend when he heard the firing. When he came out, he didn't have his war regalia, but they had captured when he was going towards his camp, somebody in his family must have captured a soldier horse that had his blue soldier jacket tied behind the saddle. I think he put that on and he went into battle. And one of the Sioux mistaked him for a Crow scout because he was wearing a soldier jacket. And he was killed and he was scalped. But he was a Southern Cheyenne chief, so there was only 7. Now there's been more than 100 books on the Custer battle. I'm going to give you some handouts. I'm going to make handouts available to the museum here. I identified all of the Cheyennes that participated in the battle. It was compiled during the 50th anniversary. And I make it easy so that you can find them. And I also am going to leave a paper that I'd like you to look at sometime. It was written by Margaret Liberty, the one that did the Cheyenne Memories with John Stanton Timber. but she also listed a whole number of resources and authors that told about the battle. That'll be available if you're interested. But it's that when we get back to that Custer getting the ashes put on his hill by a man by the name of Stone Forehead. There has been nobody else named that except one of our greatest men that helped establish this place, Father Peter Powell. His Indian name was Stone Forehead. Because our people loved him, they trusted him. So I wanted to close with that. And if you're interested in any of these handouts that I have, you can ask for them, take them. And you won't have to buy any of them books anymore, you're gonna know it all. Oh, this is Cheyenne and the Lakota. This means thank you. Oh.
We're very honored to have one of our artists here that has two works in the exhibit downstairs. Looking back on it, you know, I used to horse ride with the Morning Star riders to the Little Bighorn, and so at this time we'll hear from Bentley Spain a little bit. He's also from Northern Cheyenne as well.
Thank you. Well, I'm just honored to be among this group here. Just some really powerful stories here. And, you know, I've done different things with different folks here. Mardell and I worked at the Western Heritage Center with the Native program there, and Linwood and I have worked over the years on different things. This photo that's in the exhibition, one of the photos, I titled it, well, you can see the title there, but I'll just read it out. My dad, Zane Spang, Shki'io, on his favorite horse Cookie, honoring his relatives and counting coup on Custer. And you can see the Little Bighorn monument, the Custer monument in the background there. And what he was doing there in 2023 was he and his relatives, my uncle Leo Spang, my cousin Dennis Limberhand, and Winfield Russell, my other cousin, they got together and they wanted to do a memorial ride, Little Bighorn Memorial Ride. And so they organized it. They got with the battlefield. They got permission to go into the battlefields and parade, and then at the end of the ride, they would charge the hill outside the battlefield there. And they started that in 2003. And just a little side note, my cousin Dennis Limberhand is still with us. The rest are all gone, of the founders of the ride, the Morning Star Riders. Anyway, I just saw a photo of Dennis with Dusty Baker in Dusty Baker's book that has just come out just a few days ago, actually. And so he was a good friends with Dusty Baker. You never know how we're going to be connected to the world. You know, as Indians, we're pretty well traveled, and you know, we pop up in the craziest places. I mean, here we are. But anyway, so they started this ride in 2003, and it started small, and it grew and grew and grew, and you know, by the time it got to over 100 riders at one point, I believe, and then it started to disappear a little bit. It went into other family members took over. People started passing away, and Donovan Limberhand's family kind of took over. And what they were trying to do with that ride was to honor one of our relatives that fell at the battle that Linwood was talking about, and his name was Shkeyo, and or Limberbones. That's what's come down to my through to me as and so that was part of what they were doing. They would ride from about 15 miles or so out and ride all day, and about halfway in have lunch, and then ride the rest of the way in with flags, with Eagle staff, and it was a beautiful thing, and a powerful thing. And my dad was he just passed away in December, and he was, I called him a true warrior for the Cheyenne people, in his obituary. And he worked at Dull Knife College for over 30 years, and he got so many people through college, since his passing. We've heard so many stories from people that they wouldn't have got through college without him, and it's just an endless list of folks. And he did so much for our tribe, in other capacities too. He ran the clinic for 3 years, service unit director, and we ran a family business called Cheyenne Trail Riders for 30 years, and we took people out on horseback on the reservation, and brought in people like Linwood and different folks to help us, educate them about how we're still living as Cheyenne people today, and we still have the knowledge. We still, carry that knowledge, and we haven't gone away. And so, for him to take on and help create this ride, it was just a natural thing. That's what you do as a Cheyenne man, as a warrior, as someone who loves their community, and so he did that, and then the ride started. Like I said before, it started to kind of wane, and then it almost ended. And so I think for 1 year it did end. And then he started to want to bring it back. So he rode by himself for, I think, 2 years to bring the ride back. And so the first year that he did it, he asked me to help. And so I met him down in just maybe 5 miles out. We didn't go the full 15 miles. But I helped him saddle up his horse, and got him all situated, and then sent him on his way. And I documented everything. I'm an artist, so I wanted to document that moment. And I created a video that's out there right now, that's traveling an exhibition. It's just, I think it's still in Bogota, Colombia, but it's been traveling around the world. It's a show called To Be Named. And I did a piece on him, trying to keep that ride alive. And I used, as when we saddled the horse before he left to ride, I read the account, Kate Bighead's account of the battle. And she was a young Cheyenne girl that witnessed the battle. And it's a wildly unpopular version for Custer buffs, because if you watch the video, you'll hear it. She describes that some of the Custer's men killed themselves before the warriors could reach them, and so that was her version of it, and so and she did and I think Thomas Marquise documented that. He was a doctor on our reservation that documented a lot of things and the history. And so, but her account I read, and so if you look up that To Be Named exhibition, you'll find that video, and you'll be able to see kind of his revival of this ride. And now the ride is back. So some of his students at Dull Knife got together and asked him if they could help bring the ride back. And so he got with them, and he was able to do the ride with them before his passing, and charge the hill. And it was a really beautiful thing to see that ride come back. And now it's, like I said, it's back in full force. And at one point during the ride, the Antiques Roadshow, if you're familiar with that show, they were coming to Billings, and I'd heard about it. And we have a rifle that was handed down through my family from my grandfather, and my dad's dad, Wilfred Spang, and he said it was at the battle. He was told it was at the battle. It was given to him, and so I knew the Antiques Roadshow was coming, and so I said, let's talk to the battlefield and see if we can use the gun in the ride, parade it, and he told me that, the gun itself, I had tried to authenticate at one point when we were first given it by my grandpa, and so I took the serial numbers off it, and I researched them, and it always turned up as not there. It's the exact model of gun that was there and all that, but it had 6 digits, and the guns that were known to be there have 5 digits, and so I kind of gave up on it. And then during this buildup of the rides, he had met the curator there at the Little Bighorn battlefield, and he talked with him and described the gun to him, and that it didn't match the serial numbers, and so he said, well, let me take a look at it. And so my dad gave it to him, and for like 30 days he looked at it, and then he brought it back to him, and he said, this gun, he said, parts of it were at the battle and parts of it weren't. And he said the serial numbers don't match, but it's all, it all goes together, and it's a working gun. We've used it, we've hunted with it and stuff. And when he said that, I right away I knew that it was a gun that had been in our history through Fort Robinson, where when Dull Knife's band was captured, and they were negotiating their surrender, they took apart their guns, and they put the different parts of the guns on the children and the women as, like jewelry, so it looked like jewelry, and then they hid the rest of the guns parts. And then when they surrendered and got into Fort Robinson and were incarcerated, they put those guns back together and hid them underneath the boards, in the barracks there. And so, when he said that, I immediately knew that gun was there. And so that got me really excited. So that's when we paraded the gun that day, and then the next day the Antiques Roadshow was happening. So we paraded the gun, I documented it, and then I took it to the Antiques Roadshow the next day. And as you're going into into the show, it's a long line, it's an hour and a half or so, of winding into the event. And so and you visit with other people, and everybody wants to know what you're bringing into the show, and every single person that saw the gun and heard the story said, you're going to be on TV, this is amazing. And the roadshow had come there actually to look for things from the Little Bighorn battle specifically. And so anyway, so we got in there. I went to the gun table. I showed them the gun. I told them the story, of the curator and everything, and how this gun came down through my family and who it came through. And the only thing they would say is it has 6 digits, not 5. And that's absolutely all they would say. They didn't want to talk about the Indian guns at all. They just, and what, those 5-digit guns that are all mapped out are all soldiers' guns, mostly. And so they didn't want to talk about that soldier, the native part of the battle, which was really, unfortunate. So now I'm talking about it. Here we are. And there's a lot more I could say. It's been been a long evening, but one thing I just wanted to say in closing is that, you know, I looked at Custer's journals. I don't know if anyone's ever looked at Custer's journal. It's called My Life on the Plains. And I read it because I had heard at one point that Custer used my relatives, the women and children of my tribe, as shields in battle at some point. And I wanted to find out where that was. And so I read through the journals, and you know, it's a bit of a tedious read. I mean, it's a guy trying to, in my opinion, justify the atrocities that he committed and glorify his own, you know, efforts to do that. But at one point in his description of what happened at the Washita massacre with Black Kettle, I was particularly struck by his description of the moment before the battle. They were waiting outside the camp, waiting for the sun to come up enough so they could attack, you know, this defenseless village. And he says that at one point above the camp, through the trees came this incredibly bright light. And he said it was like you know, I'm paraphrasing, but he said it was so bright it just frightened all the soldiers. Like they didn't know what to do. It was just such a bright light, and they were trying to figure it out. And they're kind of milling around on their horses. They didn't know what to do. And then he said, then suddenly we realized it was the morning star. And then they settled down and, you know, of course, attacked the village. But when he said that, I was like, you know, that was a premonition. You know, that was what was coming. He didn't know it, but that's what was coming, and that's why he was so frightened by just the light coming through the trees. You know, that was his demise, the prediction of his demise. You know, so he went on to attack and you know, do all the atrocities that Linwood was talking about, and then to get away, he used the women and children that he captured as shields. And you know, when I described to my late father-in-law the fact that I was reading this, Leroy Bingham, just a great man too, done so much in Indian country over the years, helped our tribe so much. But he said, when he heard that I was reading My Life on the Plains, he said, "Oh, you mean My Lie on the Plains?" And he said that's what his commander, one of Custer's commanders, Brinton, said when he was asked about his opinion of that journal. He said, "Oh, you mean My Lie on the Plains?" And he despised Custer. And part of it was because there at the Washita with that massacre, he had sent a group of his men. Custer had to flank the village, and they encountered a group of warriors that were coming in, and they were all killed. But he never went back and checked on them for 2 weeks. He just escaped out of that village, and then he didn't go back for weeks to check on his own men. And when they found him, they were all dead. And so Brinton despised Custer. So you know, I've tried to piece together as much of the information about this battle as I can. And you know, I mean, me and my dad, my family, we've all hunted over on the Custer National Forest, which we have renamed the Northern Cheyenne National Forest. And you know, his presence is still with us, and it's unfortunate. I mean, you know, he was not a good person. He was not. And yeah, so anyway, thank you.
Thank you to our speakers tonight. Thank you for all your attendance. They're telling me that's a wrap. So, all right. Enjoy.